you've done some analysis on where Australia sits between the US and the Chinese alliances, which is becoming more and more topical by the day. What have you found?
Yeah, it's a constant balancing act for Australia in dealing with its number one security partner and number one investment partner in the United States, and then dealing with its number one trading partner in China. And what we found at the U.S. Study Center is that so far Australia has done pretty well in sticking to its principles. It has stuck to what it believes in. It is not engaged in unnecessary rhetoric, unnecessary trade wars, as we see in the United States. Instead, it's sticking to basic international principles and values, and it has prosecuted or dealt with the tensions between the United States and China exceedingly well. With that said, things are definitely getting tougher and more challenging. And what you're seeing right now is more economic coercion. What you're seeing is China trying to get what it wants politically and getting more control. And the tension at the heart of this is that China is prioritizing political control over economic growth, whereas in the United States and China, in general, we prioritize political freedoms over economic growth. So balancing that tension is particularly difficult.
And we just heard it's going to be part of Tiki Fullerton's documentary tonight, The Alliance, that she was speaking to a top US commander in the region, and he was saying that the Chinese influence in this region has been pernicious. That is certainly what many analysts have been saying for quite some time. So when you look at the trade issues that Australia is having with China at the moment, this comes off the back of what's been a very big soft power campaign in our region for a long time.
That's right. China has been trying for many years now to gain more influence in the region by all means necessary. It has tried to offer both carrots and sticks. With carrots, you get nice engagement and nice economic benefits, but with sticks, you sometimes suffer. And right now, thanks to Australia really laying down some key lines, red lines that it will not cross, it's suffering economically. And again, this gets back to Australia prioritizing basic political freedoms over economic growth. Australia is going to feel pain from this. It's all but inevitable because China is such a huge trading partner for Australia. With that said, the more important question from my point of view is how does Australia compensate for that? How does Australia and the United States, Five Eyes partners, OECD partners and friends and allies, how do they make up for the fact that there are definitely some doors closing with China, but perhaps some windows of opportunity for more multilateral engagement with each other?
Because that is one of the really key issues in dealing with China, is that it does come with a lot of that tension with the US. The Prime Minister, since he's come into power, has consistently said it's not a one or the other proposition. We can have strong relationships with both. But do you think that's going to be increasingly under pressure, given the global pressure in particular of the coronavirus pandemic and China's response to it?
Yes, that's all but inevitable at this point. And we're definitely seeing that the coronavirus has really shown the true colors of a number of leaders and countries. And unfortunately, the true colors for some are not so pleasant to see. And what you're seeing right now with this wolf warrior diplomacy from China is a pretty open and transparent economic coercion. With that said, the United States also uses economic tools for its policy agenda, as you can see in Iran, as you can see in North Korea. With that said, I think most of the international community has somewhat agreed with the United States, or not more than somewhat, agreed with the United States in the way that it has, until at least the Trump administration, done those tensions, prosecuted those issues with North Korea and Iran. Now, with China, I don't think there's much of international agreement with the way that it has used economic coercive tools in Australia, in Europe, in Asia. And I think that the coronavirus will likely lead to more of those sorts of issues rising up.
And just to pick up on something you mentioned earlier too about pivoting towards more multilateral approach, that's something that we can see the Australian government already doing. They've been putting quite a bit of emphasis on our relationship with India in recent times. But is that going to potentially undermine our relationship with China regardless, if it looks like we are flouting what's been a long-standing trade relationship?
No, it doesn't need to, and if it does, then that's just an unfortunate scenario. But I don't think China should see a need to punish Australia by solidifying ties with India. I think from my perspective, it's pretty well accepted that Australia needs to diversify its trade partners. When you have around a third of trade being with China, you need to not put all your eggs in one basket. With that said, what I think is in many ways a bigger priority or more long-term priority for Australia is not just diversifying its trading partners, but diversifying its economy, not being so reliant on the export of resources, becoming more of a knowledge-based economy. That is, in my opinion, how Australia can become more economically resilient and withstand further tensions as we see increasing almost every day in the region. I mean, you look at countries like Israel, when it was very clear to them that they could not get trade in their region, they diversified their economy, they became a knowledge-based economy, and they had ties all over the world. Whereas when you are less diversified and less complex, you simply are not as economically resilient.
So where does this leave Australia from here? What do you think is the most important emphasis for us in dealing with these two superpowers that we find ourselves right smack bang in the middle of?
I think what Australia has done so far, it should continue to do in terms of looking at multilateral approaches, working with allies and partners. It's pretty clear, in my opinion, the way that the Trump administration has gone about its tensions with China, that a bilateral sort of prosecution, bilateral pressure on China simply doesn't work. What does work and what has worked in the past time and time again is multilateral, coordinated, and sustained responses to what I think is widely accepted as malignant actors and malignant behavior. And so I think if Australia doubles down on its multilateral approaches, whether it be in trade, in security, or in public health, that is the way to go in the near and long term, I think. But also, simultaneous to that, Australia needs to become more economically resilient domestically.